Everybody back, Davis up front on Compass Football World Cup special from Macintyre's in Washington, D.C. I am seated next to Charles Boehm from many places, including MLSsoccer.com. I almost said MLSsoccerplayers.com, which is probably a thing, but
we'll get to that one.
USsoccerplayers.com, SoccerWire, all-around good soccer journalist. We are sitting here immediately following Croatia's 2-1 win over England after extra time at the World Cup, Luzhniki Stadium in Moscow. The English couldn't get it done at this hurdle, and Charlie, it was a feel-good story for England. You and I just got done talking to a Scottish gentleman who said, admittedly, he was not much of a football fan, who was rooting for England, which I found astounding. Yes. But he said it's because they played with integrity and pride, and they seemed to play with passion. That certainly came through. It didn't carry them through today.
Well, it's the heartbreaking loss they just suffered is still fresh, and so I think I want to show respect to England as a team, and their quality means that maybe it's a little too soon to start talking about moral victories and that sort of thing. Certainly, they surpassed expectations because their country's expectations were unusually low, and it's fascinating to watch the way that country has embraced that team with such a different philosophy, such a different identity than their previous incarnations.
Is scoring on set pieces an identity? I mean, that seemed to be the way that they got here.
I thought I would probably phrase it a different way. I would say they're a modern soccer team, a team that's incorporated so many aspects of that great league they have domestically, as well as the lessons that international soccer has provided that perhaps previous England coaches and teams have resisted or ignored. Just to play with the intelligence, with the composure, the cunning at times. I thought it was encouraging to watch, and it suggests that maybe they can actually build on this tournament, and rather than having to pick up the pieces of a charred wreck, this is an England team that can not only make their country proud this year, but maybe make some noise 2 and 4 years down the road.
Yeah, I had It's Coming Home all queued up here for us to play for everybody watching Compass Football. I don't know if you've heard the entire song. Have you ever sat through the entirety?
Oh my gosh, I think I'm a chorus-only listener.
Just the chorus.
Right,
yeah. Okay, and you look rightfully so, because it's not a great song. It's just not a great song. Now, obviously, it was their calling card.
It's a great catchphrase, though.
It is, and it drove them forward in this tournament, and they got to sort of feel good about their team, as you mentioned. Now, let's talk about the winners. Let's talk about Croatia, because I think they always felt fragile, even though they have Luka Modric, even though they have Rakitic alongside him to do some of the dirty work, even though they have a Mandzukic and a Perisic, they still felt like, and a Rebic, they felt like we didn't know if they had the goals. We didn't know if the fatigue was going to be a factor here after 2 penalty kick shootout wins, 120 minutes in each game. They did it again. Who knows how that'll play on Sunday against France? But right now, let's just celebrate what Croatia's managed to do, because, as was pointed out many, many times by John Strong on the broadcast, smallest nation to make a World Cup final since Uruguay, and Uruguay won it when 4 teams played in it. So it's pretty remarkable.
I think I'm leery of the population comparisons and that sort of thing, because these numbers don't account for culture, they don't account for history, tradition. Identity, and you can see, just the way that the Croatia squad had this visceral emotional connection and celebration with their fans in the end of the stadium there today. The tears on both sides, the field, vast expanses of checkerboards. Croatia, given their history, their relationship with the game is very special, and of course their relationship to their patriotism, to their nationalism, I think is especially strong, and has been a little bit of a 12th man for this team in this tournament. Yeah,
certainly. We all knew they had great kits with the checkerboard pattern, but we didn't necessarily knew if they could get to this point. This was their second semifinal after '98. Of course, the ever-changing politics of the Balkans means Croatia wasn't necessarily Croatia as a country didn't exist under that name prior to 96. I believe would have been their first World Cup to be able to participate in as Croatia. 96, 98. So we are maybe 94. I'm not actually sure when all that stuff happened. Yugoslavia broke up. So we're here with now Croatia going up against France on Sunday, and France is also kind of an interesting case. Now, I've talked to people who said doesn't matter. You win how you win. Obviously, Didier Deschamps isn't the kind of person to go crazy with his tactics. He's not Roberto Martinez, who he beat in a semifinal. So, what do you make of a France side that maybe is playing in second gear against what has to be a gassed Croatian side, regardless of how much they dug deep to win this game?
Well, part of what I was alluding to earlier with England is that I think that there's at least, if it's not reality, certainly a strong perception that modern matches in these situations with these stakes have to be managed, and that there's not always don't always have to be in high gear. That there are times when you need to try to understand what's required, and I think that's where I saw England make that big strides this year, was that IQ, that understanding. Spain have been masters of that, and I think it's been a major key to their success over the past decade. And I think you see that with France. This is a team that's always been conscious of the downside, the double-edged nature of their attacking quality, of their ability to get forward. So what we may see as being stuck in second gear, and for another set of eyes, is simply managing a situation to minimize risks. Now, I think in a final, you lose a little bit of that. Some of the breaks can come off depending on the personality of the decision makers. I think we may see a little bit of the break come off, and both teams go for it as much as their legs will allow them.
That would be interesting. Obviously, it's all right there in front of you. I mean, the trophy is 90 minutes away if you can find one more goal than your opponent. I don't want to jump ahead to Sunday necessarily, because we don't know how Croatia is going to come out of that match. You did have Mandzukic went down late in that match, whether that was CONCACAFing or wasting some time. And
he was looked like there was less of a gimp when he ran to the corner to celebrate after the final whistle. So
you're right, exactly. Yeah, it may have been an opportunistic time spent on the field for Mandzukic, on the ground rather. So we don't exactly know. I mean, I didn't think that Subasic, for example, was going to come into this game and be completely 100%. Now, he didn't have to do penalties this time around, but clearly whatever ailment he had against Russia in the final minutes of regulation didn't carry into this game. Now, again, he went through extra time and penalties against Russia, so maybe there wasn't a reason to doubt.
This tournament's a slog, though, Jason. This tournament is now, we're a month in. There's a lot of matches, a lot of stress, both physical and mental, in a compact period of time. Everybody wants to be on the field for big games like this. It's just a question of how you can kind of find that balance between fitness and form and fatigue.
It's almost, at this point, it feels like maybe you just toss so much of the analysis out the window. I mean, and maybe even today, England gets a goal from Kieran Trippier in the 5th minute, and holding on to a lead for 85 minutes is always going to be difficult. But as you said, England was the better team for the first half. It felt like, they wasted some chances and it came back to bite them, but it felt like England had a clear idea of how they wanted to play. They were getting themselves in good positions. They had, an off day from Kane, or, obviously Raheem Sterling can be dangerous, but doesn't always find the final pass or the shot that will finish the move. So, can you say that Croatia was better beyond the scoreline? Because I don't know that that's really how we should be looking at these games.
Well, I think, again, a key to getting results in these situations is maximizing your periods of dominance that you can build. It's so hard, right? You have to earn the right to play, as they say. You have to put yourself in a situation where you can assert some sort of dominance, tactically, individual matchups, whatever it may be, and then you have to make the use of it. Russia, I thought, was very good at that, whether it was a home crowd or whatever the factors were that were allowed them to make maximum use of the periods where they had control of matches to get goals and to build leads. That was what England, in retrospect, they needed to do. In the first half, they needed to go into the locker room 2-0, maybe even 3-0 up. There certainly were the opportunities to do so, and the soccer gods very often punish that wastefulness.
Yeah, it comes down to a couple of moments. We talked about in this tournament how good Harry Maguire was for England. John Stones had both sides of the coin today. Kyle Walker, beaten on the goal by Perisic, if I'm not mistaken. Just maybe not lackadaisical necessarily, but you don't feel the presence behind you. You go in for what you think is a fairly easy headed clearance. You're in front of goal. You always got to be aware of that. And Perisic just kind of I don't know. I don't know. You can't necessarily. Well, Gareth Southgate got that wrong, or Dallas got it right. It's just that moment between
very
those players.
tight margins, very fine margins by which these games and these moments are decided. And it's crushing when you're the one whose focus slips just a bit, or again you don't make the most of it. Do those players involved in that game-winning goal on England's side, are they more culpable than the attacking players who fail to convert at the other?
Well, I mean, look, you go back to obviously again it turned out the way it did because Perisic scores, Mandzukic gets the winner in extra time. Luka Modric was he was culpable on England's goal because he commits the foul that allows Trippier to score the free kick. And if Croatia never finds their goal, well, then we're sitting here now saying Luka Modric, well, but he lost that game for Croatia. But over the balance of 120 minutes, Luka Modric was massive, and he was obviously just completely wiped out
as well. I mean, he's
completely wiped out.
I have to say, I think there's probably some Frenchmen that deserve contention as well, but I've definitely got Modric at or near the top. I think he's got to be considered a strong contender for player of the tournament. And I love this matchup coming up on Sunday, the central midfield battle with him and Rakitic, Pogba, Kante. It's going to be really fascinating.
And you expect, I mean, just like we expected today to be about the midfield and how England would be able to handle Modric and Rakitic. You have England was about, okay, well, Jordan Henderson has to stay home. He has to protect that back line. He has to be the shield. You got Ashley Young and Dele Alli and Lingard ahead of Henderson. In France's setup, obviously Kante is going to do all of that dirty work. He's going to break up play. He's going to recover the ball for France. And then it's, okay, well, and we don't know about Matuidi, by the way. Speaking of injuries, he goes out. He has the concussion moment. I haven't seen it said to be a concussion for sure, but certainly we know people who are.
There should be doubts. There
Yes,
should be doubts,
right.
Without knowing any more details than the public, the rest of the public. But I think the other interesting thing about Croatia's performance today is kind of pushing through the tired legs. My experience with those moments is that. A player like Modric, who's covered incredible amounts of ground over the past couple of weeks, that spark, that first step may be the thing that deserts you in a high mileage situation. But the relentless fitness, the ground coverage, the work rate still is there. So even if he doesn't have that spark, he's still there in the 119th minute.
It was toward the late in that match today, and I don't remember where I'm guessing it was Croatia 2, England 1 at the time. Maybe it was even in the first period of extra time. And Modric is bringing the ball into the England's defensive third, and he sort of just gets caught in between with his decision making, and basically just hits a soft 15-yard pass straight to an England defender. Luka Modric doesn't do that. That's not something that you would expect him to do. And then 5 minutes later, I look up and he's playing a perfect outside of the right foot, switch into space on the left-hand side for Croatia to create an attack. And it just, he has an uncharacteristic moment. And by the way, I think after he turned that ball over, he raced back to recover it as well and chased down the England player who was streaking up the right-hand or left-hand side for England. So, I don't know, it's just something remarkable from a player like that who led Croatia to this moment. And, again, they've got pretty remarkable players. And we were talking to the Scottish gentleman earlier, and he said, "Oh, Croatia's an underdog," or something to that effect. And they are. But like you said about, let's throw the population out the window. Look at where their best players are playing. I mean, it's Juventus, it's Real Madrid, it's Barcelona. I mean, these are not slouches. Now, maybe defensively, Dejan Lovren had an interesting day in the first 15 minutes. He was a disaster, and he got better. And then Vida, who was making controversy ahead of the match, and there was some discussion about whether he should be suspended for what he said. So, I guess it's just indicative.
Again, the role of nationalism, which is such a hot topic, right, in world sort of geopolitics right now, it's still an enduring aspect of the World Cup, and it's one of those few places where we can all sort of at least set aside our reservations about we may have about flag waving. About
it's the last bastion of nationalism,
national identity. It does add an extra bit of fuel here, and you can see it, especially with a country like Croatia, and even the way that everything is talked about with teams like that around the team. their self-conception. It's one of the most intoxicating things about a World Cup and international tournaments. Close to this level.
And if you look at the other finalists, right? You look at France and we remember '98. Remember the multicultural makeup of that team, and how it sort of ushered in a new era for France in terms of what France was, how France saw itself. And here we are 20 years later, and we're having the same discussions about France. And, my timeline, I'm sure yours is too, Charlie, my timeline on Twitter is full of people who are saying, France is Africa's team. No, there's no African teams left, and I guess you could say that makes it, easy to latch onto France because they're good and because they have such talent. But it's also a double-edged sword. And I don't want to, I'm not in a position to comment on that, but it is a double-edged sword because it's France's identity is a reflection of the colonial history of the country. So here we are kind of debating the plus and minuses of the fact that there's a Kylian Mbappe and a Paul Pogba and a Blaise Matuidi and an N'Golo Kante in France, and they wouldn't be playing for that country if X, Y, or Z hadn't happened 200 years ago.
So I'm sure many of your viewers have read the great article about the banlieues, the Paris banlieues becoming, I think it was Simon Cooper, basically made the case that it's become the greatest single concentration of footballing talent in the world today, surpassing the greater Sao Paulo, which is incredible when you think about it, and all the different factors that went into that. And it's not it has been a source of contention in both directions. It's not that long ago that prime leadership of the French Federation and the French national team were busted having these secret conversations about quotas and limiting the involvement of players of
Laurent Blanc caught up in that.
Yeah, and this is just like our country in the United States here struggles sometimes with matters of diversity and identity. It's no different in France. It's perhaps a different flavor of the same phenomenon. But I think we'll all be having some fascinating conversations about this in the days ahead, because there is great weight, symbolism, and beyond that comes from a team like this reaching these heights. So
coming back to France and how they play, Charlie, we'll spend a little time on that before we get to just maybe looking ahead to Sunday a bit. Again, Deschamps is conservative by nature, and it's worked, and so you can't really throw a lot of criticism his way because he's got his team in a World Cup final with a chance of winning their second title. What is it? Obviously, we would like to see. I say we would like to see. I guess that really isn't the point. I mean, it's more about how their method of winning is working for them, and I guess that's all that matters at this point. I guess what I'm getting to is the balance between them, and especially if Matuidi is out. How do you see France if they find themselves, say, a goal or two down to Croatia? What can they do to sort of turn that around? Because they may have sort of played themselves into, well, this is the only thing we know how to do at this point.
It's an age-old topic, the sort of angel on one shoulder and the devil on the other. Conservatism and control versus dynamism and creation, and the instability that can come with that. Many teams have faced this question over the years, over the decades. I think what we know is that there is elite talent in key positions on the field for France. And if I wanted to look at Deschamps' decisions in a charitable light, he's doing his best to create a stable platform for talents like Mbappe and Pogba to create without concern and create a foundation for them to go forward, even if that may limit the amount of options, of attacking options, the amount of numbers that are pushed into the final third. So I think that they've gotten to this point now. Will he take the handbrake off? It's certainly the moment for it.
Well, it's also okay. It also comes back, and we're not going to be able to flesh out all of these problems or questions or the philosophical issues of playing sort of proactive on-the-ball soccer versus maybe a little bit more reactive soccer. I mean, we've seen this tournament be a reflection of where tactics have turned in the last decade or so. I mean, even Brazil. I mean, the counter-pressing, playing behind the ball, looking for the counterattack, playing with that platform, as you said. If you have players like Mbappe and Griezmann, why wouldn't you? And obviously Dembele, who comes off the bench, then you're playing to their strengths, even if you're not necessarily saying we're going to bring the ball up and we're going to put 3, 4 guys in the box. We're going to have runners. We're going to play intricate passing moves.
Well, again, you look at what Conte does. He's a special player. He's able to do the work of two players in a lot of ways. But I think most coaches would say they would prefer that no one player, no matter how great he or she is, would not have to do the work of two players. They always want to have the right balance, the right numbers behind the ball, because this has been a World Cup of transition. I mean, some of the biggest upsets and some most surprising results we've seen have come from the efficient use of rapid transitions, creating imbalances, and taking advantage of lapses. And certainly, Croatia did it a little bit differently. But England will, I think, look at today's match look at the film and feel very frustrated that it wasn't long periods that undid them or placed situations where they were necessarily pushed into their own end. It was those fleeting moments, maybe just a step or two too late to close down a cross, maybe just an extra foot of space that an attacker's granted in the box, just that little bit of unpreparedness for an unexpected moment of genius like that flicked header that led to the game winner. So again, every coach, I think, probably loses a lot of sleep over trying to create a system that allows their players to not be punished for those moments.
Right. So yeah, exactly. You're getting to the point of, and this is it's clearly Deschamps' idea, and it's how a lot of coaches coach. It's let's take control of everything we can control, and try to squeeze out as many of the variables as possible. I mean, you can't squeeze out every variable. That's the sport. That's players making decisions, making mistakes, a slip, whatever it might be. In the case of the winner for Croatia, Mandzukic being a step faster, getting to that ball. So France's idea is, okay, we can put Pogba and Conte and Matuidi on the field together in front of a back four where we know there's stability there, and then again, we have a platform. We have enough people not behind the ball necessarily, but in disciplined places.
Structure and control, I would put it.
Control. Yeah. And it's the World Cup of structure and control.
I would surmise that we may get a lot of news that could change this in the next few days, but my instincts off the bat tell me that a neutral fan should root for an early Croatia goal on Sunday, because
that would probably be best. Yeah.
I think Croatia's identity, they've managed games well. They managed their lead in the final stages today, but they're not necessarily a team that's going to be comfortable bunkering in and going fully reactive. Whereas France, I think they have the horses to go and chase a game. They haven't necessarily had to do that much, but there have been a few shootouts that were involved in. They have the players that can open up the throttle, that can attack space, that can attack individual matchups.
Yeah, and I think what this World Cup is teaching us again, and this is not to say it hasn't been thrilling or interesting or there haven't been fascinating stories or we aren't getting a lot of drama. We just got some more today. But it's just a reminder that the international game is a different beast than what we see, especially at the top end with the Champions League in Europe. It's these teams are less well drilled. They don't know each other quite as well. They do everything they can, but the level of the soccer is always going to be a little bit behind what you would watch.
And just the moments, though. Yeah. The moments that make these occasions so special for us to watch and make billions of people watch around the world, those can weigh a ton on a player's back. I mean, again, I found Croatia unrecognizable for at least the first 45 minutes because these sharp, ruthless, veteran professionals playing at the game's highest levels were muffing touches, were putting balls into out of play, were missing passes that they would connect 99 times out of 100. You could see even for that team with so much quality and so much experience, the moment got big for them.
I think it's, and this is just my gut here because I'll never know, but while the best soccer is typically played in any given season on the club level, in the Champions League usually, the intensity of the World Cup, especially in the quarters, the semis, the final, cannot be matched. I mean, even a Champions League final, and those players are under intense pressure, but they're playing for a club that maybe their connection is strong to it, but it can't be as strong as their connection to their country and their family who's back home watching them. All of those numerous connections. What you just, how you started us out. The World Cup is the sort of the last place that sort of that unfettered national pride comes out in ways that, sometimes are complicated, but also add flavor to this.
And there's glory in the imperfections, right? Because when you watch a high-level Champions League match, you're watching teams that spend hours upon hours, hundreds of days together for long periods, from midsummer right through the year, through a 10, 11-month season. You're seeing patterns of play. You're seeing set pieces, juego de posición, moments that have been drilled and drilled and drilled to the point that, as some have compared it to American football in some ways, where there's almost rehearsed plays. There's fewer uncoordinated, unplanned movements than ever in the high levels of the game. But at the World Cup, even with a month's training camp, even with a lot of veterans in the fold, you just can't do that to the same extent. You can't plot out every moment. You can't. The Mourinhos of the world have less influence by nature.
World Cup 2018 coming to an end very quickly. Sunday's final featuring France versus Croatia and a third-place game.
I love the third-place game.
You do?
We're going to hear a lot of people bagging on the third-place game over the next few days.
Okay.
And I got very little time for it because we all know it's not the same intensity. We all know it's not the same quality. We all know that some players and coaches would rather not deal with it. But we're at the World Cup. We've all been engorging ourselves on this buffet, the soccer Christmas, right?
Yeah.
And why would you turn away an
more
extra
soccer.
game at the end of the line?
Absolutely, more soccer.
The drug is about to dry up. The supplies are dwindling. Enjoy every single 90 minutes you can get.
There you go. Let's do that.
Soapbox.
Let's do that. Charlie Boehm joining me here at Macintyre's in D.C. Compass Football, Davis up front. We will talk to you soon. Talk World Cup final on Sunday. Thanks for watching, guys.